Well, I'll reiterate what he said. It's good to be here tonight. Preacher Bill called me today, and with Tony having to do what he's doing, and as long as y'all sit there and grin at me and keep and encourage me, I'll do fine. I was probably only about 60% ready when he called, so the rest of the 40% I crammed on the way, or when I got home this evening. After supper, I sat down, took some more notes. I haven't taught and haven't been asked to teach at church in a long time, and I feel honored to be asked and taught to teach. And sometimes I get my tongue tangled. It's okay, we'll work through it. Get a little nervous, but I love y'all, and I hope that before night's over with, that we'll all get something, even me, what I haven't so far out of this. One other thing on a personal note, when you're asked to teach, read the Bible, supposed to read it daily. But when you're asked to teach, I guess the word would be forces. It forces you to get that shovel out, fill up that wheelbarrow instead of just taking a cup and taking it off the top, and instead of reading narratives, just in the way the story goes, then we can, it makes us sit back and think, what's God trying to tell us through this? And I hope to maybe tonight, with his help, do that. So we'll go ahead and get started. If y'all would turn to Genesis 26. Genesis 26, I'm hoping to cover it all tonight. I might have took too many notes, but I did get up here earlier than we normally do. So I've still got an hour and 51 minutes to deliver this now. Anyway, there's no time limit on this. And I told him, I said, if you expect me to speak for 30 minutes, I might not be able to. So, but if I keep jawing like I am now, we'll be here to 9 o'clock. So, if you're there, Terry, would you like to read? I'd like for you to read verses 1 through 5, if you would, please.
Okay. And there was a famine in the land, besides the first famine that was in the days of Abraham. And Isaac went into Abimelech, king of the Philistines, unto Gerar. And the Lord appeared unto him and said, Go not into Egypt, dwell in the land which I shall tell thee of. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with thee, and will bless thee, for unto thee and unto thy seed I will give all these countries. I will perform the oath which I swear unto Abraham thy father, and I will make thy seed to multiply as the stars of heaven, and will give unto thy seed all the countries. In thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because that Abraham obeyed my voice, and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws.
Well, we see there that just like what happened to Abraham earlier in Genesis, that there was a famine in the land. We've been, in the last year or so, we've been through a tough time here in our country, our nation. Some people have, especially ones in the, and I don't mean this in no way, but the lower paying service industries where they were shut down due to the coronavirus and the COVID-19. A lot of people like that have been through rough times. But we're not in a famine here. There's food. There's plenty of food to go around for the most part. I mean, there's some people go hungry. There's the homeless and things of that nature. But do y'all remember the 1980s? The Ethiopian famine. You see the pictures of those little kids and the adults all standing around pencil thin except for their stomachs, where they's bloated. Now that's a famine. That is the definition, what I think of in my head as a famine. So things were pretty bad. He told him, he said that one thing that you can, that I got from this was God promised the land of Canaan to Isaac and his heirs. And all through this, though, Isaac had been trained up in a believing dependence upon this divine grant. So he made a covenant with Abraham, and then later on, and Isaac had been brought up in this, that them and his descendants would end up with the land of Canaan. They said the famine was in the land, and Isaac still hangs on to this promise. That's one thing we can always depend on, isn't it? Is the promises of God. You know, I can make a promise, but especially let's say I'm going to say, Glenn, I'm going to buy you a brand new truck within the next couple of years. Well, if I don't have any financial means or anything to back it up, then that's a lie. I mean, I can't keep that promise. But God, it doesn't matter what, God will keep his promises. It says one thing to remember is the real worth of God's promises. They aren't diminished because bad things happen to us. And a little bit, I mean, and I'm not, my family's not the only ones that's going through hard times, especially with this COVID and stuff that's going on, because I got sick in December with the flu. And then right after that, I think it's when Chad and his family caught COVID. And there's probably some others in here that had been sick. And well, I was out of work a week, went back for 8 days. And Christmas Day, I caught COVID. Then there I was out 2 more weeks. Somebody said, well, was it that bad? After catching the flu, yes, it was. It was pretty bad. My immune system was down. And, you know, I'm just telling you my personal story about that is I was miserable for 2 weeks. And one day, fever up and down, up and down. And I'm not the only one that's went through this. So, and then Michelle's daddy catches it, and then he has a stroke and passes away. Uncle Lloyd passes away. My Uncle Dennis passes away. Family's been through quite a lot lately, but we're not the only ones. That's one thing we've been trying to remember. And to keep that in perspective, it seems a little bit morbid, but I look on the websites like Westmoreland and Bean. If you'll look on those websites, the families that's had to go through the same thing our families went through. You think, well, God, where are you? But he's here. He's here. He's here with us the whole time, offering comfort with us the whole time. Another thing, if we are where we need to be with God, then nothing but our unbelief and lack of faith can prevent our comfort in his care. That's one thing I read. I got on a commentary for this chapter, and that thing right there stood out amongst everything in that commentary is if something's wrong with our relationship with God, it's not on his end. He's there for us. It's on our end. We're the ones that either have unbelief or we have enmity between each other, where we don't get along, strife, and you'll see that later on in this chapter. One thing that Preacher Bill got me this study Bible here, Henry Morris. Well, I used it as well, as long with the commentary and a couple other resources when I was studying this. And there'll be a couple times I read a little bit of the commentary out of here, but the commentary on 26:2 said, this is apparently the first time in over 50 years that God had appeared to Isaac. Here he confirmed a covenant made with Abraham and Isaac on Mount Moriah. It was also the first famine in the land of promise since Abram had gone down to Egypt over a century earlier. Isaac, unused to such testings, now needed special assurance because things had got bad. And then God told him, said, don't go down to Egypt. He didn't say like your daddy did. You know, he said, don't go down there. Just talking about the covenant with Abraham, the obedience of Abraham to the divine command was evidence of that faith. As a sinner, he was justified before God, and the effect of that love whereby truth faith works. Why was he justified before God? one of the biggest things I can think of was that his willingness to sacrifice Isaac. He showed his love, he showed his faith, he showed it to God. So therefore, God made a covenant with him. That's somebody that would get along with God, not unlike some of the others. So, let's see what else here. Because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. Right there it says the reason. He kept his laws. He kept his statutes. He minded him. He was obedient to God. God also testifies that he approved this obedience to encourage others, especially Isaac. You know, Isaac was brought up in this. He was brought up knowing the promises. So he was trained in it, just like we all train, like we try to train. You trained your children, Glenn. You trained Shelby. We try to train our children in the way they should go. And the same thing even goes down to the grandkids. You hope that you train your kids enough to where you go down to the grandkids. So now we're going to move on to verses 6 through 11. Mr. Allen McGee, are you there?
Yep.
Would you read 6 through 11, please?
And Isaac dwelt in Gerar, and the men of the place asked him of his wife, and he said, She is my sister. For he feared to say she was his wife, she is my wife. Said he, the men of the place should kill me for Rebekah, because she was fair to look upon. And it came to pass, when he had been there for a long time, that Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out of the window and saw, and behold, Isaac was sporting with Rebekah, his wife. And Abimelech called Isaac and said, Behold, of a surety she is thy wife. And how saidst thou, She is my sister? And Isaac said unto him, Because I said, Lest I die for her. And Abimelech said, What is this thou hast done unto us? One of the people might likely have lying with thy wife, and thou shouldest have brought guiltiness upon us. And Abimelech charged all of his people, saying, He that toucheth this man or his wife shall surely be put to death.
Back in verse 7. Thank you, Alan. And the men of this place asked him of his wife. And he said, She is my sister, for he feared to say, She is my wife. Lest, said she, the men of this place should kill me for Rebekah, because she was fair to look upon. That sounds familiar, don't it? That was studied earlier in the book of Genesis, wasn't it? Abraham and Sarah. That's my sister. Boy, I'm afraid they're going to kill me. Boy, I don't have enough faith right now. Isn't that what it boils down to? Is sometimes, and this comes up later in what I've got for tonight, but doesn't that seem, the lack of faithfulness, doesn't that seem worse than him telling a lie in a way? I'm pretty sure we'd all feel tempted to do that. Because I know I'm not immune to saying something like that. I mean, all of us, I guess, at some point have said something to kind of cover, for lack of a better word, I guess.
Did you do that?
No, I didn't do that. No, I didn't do that at all. Miss Metcalf Allen did that.
Mm-hmm.
Then here come the little ruler upon the slap in the hand. Isaac's denial of his wife cannot be imitated or even excused. Well, that's an understatement, isn't it? I wrote that down. I looked at it and I said, well, that's quite an understatement. The temptation was the same that overtook his father Abraham. That's another duh. I mean, I wrote that and I'm like, no kidding. His fear and lack of faith seems to be greater sin than telling the truth about Rebecca. Well, Rebecca was known to be pretty, right? You go into another country, you take your wife, you know, she might be a little foreign looking, maybe exotic. Well, she's pretty. But it all seems to catch up with him, don't it? It says, and it came to pass that Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out the window and saw, and behold, Isaac was sporting with Rebekah, his wife. Now, it has a little translation. Well, sporting, he wasn't playing tennis with her or nothing. He was caressing her. He was, well, look at Glenn and Terry right there. The only thing lacking is him stroking her face or stroking her hair. You know, something that's very intimate between a man and a wife. And he saw it. That ain't his sister. Well, what's going on here? And Abimelech called Isaac and said, behold, of a surety she is wife. And how sayest thou? Why'd you say that she's your sister? And Isaac said to him, well, I was afraid I was going to die.
Scared to death.
I'm scared to death of this place. I'm a stranger here. I'm a foreigner. And Abimelech said, what is that hast done to us? One of the people might likely, or soon, as it's translated in here, there's that little tease here, and it says soon, have lain with thine wife, and thou shouldest have brought guiltness upon us. And then Abimelech told all his people, don't mess with her. If you mess with her, I'll put y'all to death. Now, I've been reading some about Abimelech. Now, Abimelech was the same name as who Abraham had to deal with in the Philistines. And I got to reading about that, and it said Abimelech was more of a title, like Pharaoh in Egypt. So Abimelech was more like a title than the actual name. So it's 50 years apart. That'd been a long time for one guy to reign. So, and that's just what I read. And I just thought that was a pretty good note. I would have thought it was the same guy.
Me too.
But, and it could have been, but according to what I've been reading, though, that it was just like president.
President. Different too.
Yeah, could have been. So let's go on to 12 through 17. Alan, would you mind reading 12 through 17, please?
Sure. Then Isaac sowed in that land and received in the same year 100-fold, and the Lord blessed him. And the man waxed great and went forward and grew until he became very great. For he had possession of flocks and possession of herds and great store of servants, and the Philistines envied him. For all the wells which his father's servants had digged in the days of Abraham, his father the Philistines had stopped them and filled them with earth. And Abimelech said to Isaac, go from us, for thou art much mightier than we. And Isaac departed thence and pitched his tent in the valley of Gerar and dwelt there.
I found these pretty interesting because, you know, he started sowing or planting in the land and said he received 100-fold. So that means God blessed him. God blessed him greatly. And another thing I saw in here in Henry Marsh Bible 26:12, it has like the heading 100-fold. According to this is the first mention of seed sowing in the Bible. Throughout the Bible, seed sowing is common symbolic of Christian witnessing. And this aspect is paramount in the first mention of seed sowing in the New Testament. In both cases, it is providentially significant that the good seed brought forth 100-fold. Well, for him to get 100-fold, according to that, he wasn't throwing out bad seed, was he? So he was probably doing the right thing. He was living right. He was trying to do right. He probably treated his servants right. He tried to get along with everybody. So God blessed him. Not only that, he'd been minding God, a lot like Abraham had. So, verse 14 says, for he had possessions of flocks and possessions of herds and great store of servants, and the Philistines envied him. Well, now we got trouble. Why is it when somebody starts getting something that, why can't I get that? I work as hard, if not harder than he does. I work more hours than they do. And I ain't got nothing.
I deserve it more.
I deserve it more than they do. Woe is me, poor baby. Well, it said he waxed great and went forward and grew until he became very great. So therefore, I don't think that's just talking about his wealth. I think that's talking about his reputation. I think it's talking about anything that you'd have if you was in front of a whole bunch of people, you know, surely not a politician. No, a statesman maybe, but not a politician. Let's see here. I wrote down here, said the Philistines envied Isaac. The king told Isaac to leave. Men often grieve or are jealous of the good of others. And why is that? Just human nature, isn't it? I mean, after the fall, I mean, well, man, Alan's got that diesel truck. I've seen him drive it to church. Always wanted one of those, you know. Why's he got one? Anyway, verse 17, it says, and Isaac departed thence and pitched his tent in the valley of, how'd you say that? Because that sounded right. Gerar? Gerar. And dwelt there. So he got it left. The narrative. All right, so God told him not to go to Egypt, but go where he told him to. So he went where he told him to. Then he lied about his wife. Then the king said, don't mess with her. And then he went over there and started doing things right. So apparently he got forgiveness. You know, he made things right with God. So now he's doing great. And then here comes more sin. They envied him. So now he leaves. A lot of times wisdom from above will teach us to give up our right, and draw away from contentious people or situations. So they started envying him. He says, well, since I'm not getting along, my reputation's probably still good, but they still envy me. So I think I'll just leave. Sometimes if we are wrongfully driven from one place, the Lord will make room for us in another. And that leads into verse 18. Andy, would you mind reading verses 18 through 25, please?
Isaac digged again the wells of water, which they had digged in the days of Abraham's father. For the Philistines had stopped them after the death of Abraham. And he called their names after the names by which his father had called them. And Isaac's servants digged in the valley and found there a well of springing water. And the herdmen of Gerar did strive with Isaac's herdmen, saying, the water is ours. And he called the name of the well Esek, because they strove with him. And they digged another well and strove for that also. And he called the name of it Sitnah. And he removed from thence and digged another well, and for that they strove not. And he called the name of it Rehoboth. And he said, for now the Lord hath made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land. And he went up from thence to Beersheba. And the Lord appeared unto him the same night, and said, I am the God of Abraham thy father, fear not. For I am with thee, and will bless thee, and multiply thy seed for my servant Abraham's sake. And he built an altar there, and called upon the name of the Lord, and pitched his tent there, and there Isaac's servants digged the well.
So he left. So what's one thing we need in life? We need water. We need water to live. I think they've done some studies in the past saying, well, you can go a long time without food, but you can go a very short time without water. Your body is shut down, you'll die. So what they do? They start digging some wells. You gotta have wells for your animals, your herds. Let's say it didn't rain, maybe they didn't have a way to, maybe they carried water to their crops. Who knows? I don't know. It didn't say how many servants he had, but I'm sure he had quite a few. Them being, well, the rich man, you know, back then being rich didn't mean, well, I've got $1 million in the bank. It means, well, I might have 100 sheep and 200 cattle and all the milk you want and all the food you want to eat and all the vegetables, and you know, he can keep up a whole crowd. So he began digging the wells, and local folks didn't like it, and they didn't get along with each other. Well, here we go again. No, it just don't seem like anybody get along, does it? If we're not living in God's way, or if we're not right with God, that's what it ended up being. But they all time being enmity. So he dug 2 wells, and if it's translated, he named the 2 wells, he named the first one strife, because they didn't get along. And he named the next one hatred, because they didn't like him. They hated him. And he removed from thence and digged another well, for that they strove not. And he called of it Rehoboth. And he said, for now the Lord hath made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land. So I got to thinking about that. That first well he dug earlier in the chapter, and people didn't like him. I wonder if they'd dug a well then, they'd called him envy. So you had envy, strife, hatred, but now he digs another well, because earlier it seemed to be the nature of worldly things for people to be like that. People sometimes at their best are quarrelsome. You ever met somebody just quarrelsome? You had a hard time being around them. I went to church with people like that. We took care of a graveyard one time, and there was this lady in our church, in the church, not just someone who had somebody in the graveyard, but she had brother, and rightly so, she wanted the grave to look nice. If she put flowers on it, she wanted the flowers to be there. But occasionally a dog would visit and would leave a little present. And she wanted us to clean that up. And I wouldn't do it. So she went and told on me to the caretaker of the graveyard. Now, me being an adult, I got told on. So right there, if I could see her face right now in my brain, and when I read quarrelsome, that's who I thought of. And that's bad to say, but it seemed like no matter how you mowed the graveyard, how her brother's grave looked, it wasn't right. She seemed like she wanted to quarrel. I felt like having somebody holding up round signs in the boxing ring.
Got a guy I've worked for years, and don't matter what you do or how good a job you do it, he's always said, "Oh, that looks like crap." He'll say, "But I'm gonna pay you anyhow.
I'm gonna pay you
Yeah, I'm
anyway.
gonna pay you anyhow." So you just want to fuss about something.
Let's see. And I just read in 24 that Isaac dug another well. So they dug quite a few wells, and there was no strife. He called the well, let's see what he called it, Rehoboth or Rehob. I don't know. Anyway, it translates that spacious, because God had made room for them. Does God make room for us? He makes room for us to come into Him and pray, sit with Him, talk with Him just like you talk to, well, you talk to Him just like you talk to your grandson. Just talk to Him. That's what He wants. That's why we were created, to be company for Him, to do His will.
The only way is through Jesus.
That's right. It is the only way. He makes room for us in His bosom to come up when things are hard, like it has been for us last couple months, to just go and have peace. Let's see. 25, and he built an altar there and called upon the name of the Lord and pitched his tent there. And there Isaac's servants digged a well. God's promised that he's going to bless him. God promised Isaac that he's going to bless him, be with him, and multiply his descendants. That was in 24. And the Lord God appeared unto him the same night and said, I am the God of Abraham, thy father. Fear not, for I am with thee and will bless thee and multiply thy seed for my servant Abraham's sake. Doing what God says. Even went down to the next generation. And when Isaac did what God said, Isaac's obedience to God seemed to protect him a lot from these envies and strifes and all these quarrelsome people that he'd been around. Who hadn't read yet? Chad,
Well,
have you read? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
the only thing I was gonna say is, we had talked about earlier in Genesis, when Abraham was digging a well, how important the well was. Well is a huge thing.
Mm-hmm.
And as you was reading that, I got to thinking, Isaac, and Abraham, when they all dug wells, they're trying to bring life. And you got the Philistines that keep filling it in and trying to take life away. And I just found that kind of interesting thought that, you've got people out there in the world that's trying to take life away, and not just physical life, but your spiritual life, trying to take it away from you. And you've got people like Isaac and Abraham, and of course many others, people who go with us, Billy Graham, everybody trying to get life back. And it's just kind of funny that we should all be striving to dig that well.
Yeah.
And how we should all be trying to get that life back.
It's kind of like sowing that seed, like they talked about earlier, and how this right here in 26:12, the 100-fold. If you sow the good seed, like going out and visiting or ministering to folks that are in need, like y'all do, going and taking wood, taking food. Y'all ministered to us when we was going through our heart, when we was going through our time. And like he said, feels like life springing up inside of it, instead of, because death can be a thing. And I know I went through this when my son died, and it was a rough time. Sometimes it doesn't seem like there's no end to that. But if someone comes and sows that seed, that good seed, it's 100 times more the blessing than you get from the grief and the misery.
And another thing I find fascinating is how God blesses Isaac through Abraham's faithfulness. When I was lost in the world, I never thought about me trying to live for the Lord might trickle down to my kids or my grandkids. So that, right there alone ought to give us a little bit more get up and go to live for the Lord and obey Him and try to live right, because it may trickle down to our kids and our grandkids, the blessings, that just from obeying the Lord.
Yeah.
And I've seen it happen in families, just one person in a family be faithful to the Lord, and that one person faithfulness trickle down through the family, and other people get saved and go to live for the Lord, just because of one person was faithful.
Well, those prayers reached the ears and the heart of God.
Yeah.
And with that person living right, like you said, then those prayers will be answered. Verses 26 through 33. Chad, can you see that?
Yeah, I'll show try. And Abimelech went to him from Gerar and Ahazat, one of his friends, and Phicol, the chief captain of his army. And Isaac said unto him, wherefore come ye to me, seeing ye hate me, and have sent me away from you? And they said, we have certainly that the Lord was with thee. And we said, let there be now an oath betwixt us, even betwixt us and thee, and let us make a covenant with thee, that thou wilt do us no hurt, as we have not touched thee, and as we have done unto thee nothing but good, and have sent thee away in peace. Thou art now the blessed of the Lord. And he made them a feast, and they did eat and drink, and they rose up betimes in the morning, and sware one to another, and Isaac sent him away, and they departed from him in peace. And it came to pass the same day that Isaac's servants came and told him concerning the well which they had digged, and said unto him, we have found water. And he called it Sheba. Therefore the name of the city is Beersheba unto this day.
I'm gonna read 26 once more. And Abimelech went to him from Gerar, and Ahuzath, one of his friends, and Phicol, something like that, and the chief captain of his army. Wonder what Isaac thought when he saw them coming. Oh boy, what now? These people won't leave me alone for anything. So Isaac asked him, what do you want from me? Y'all hate my guts. You know, why are you here? Everything I do, you envy. There's strife. There's hate, hatred. Why are you here? I mean, you got rid of me. What more do you want? Well, what did they want? They seen how God had blessed them. We want to make a treaty.
They want a little bit of that.
Maybe so.
Yeah.
Maybe so. That's like you said. The faithfulness of one in a family can lead a whole family to Christ. They look at, I can think of a praying mother or grandmother. Well, I want what she's got. I want me a little bit of that. She's peace. She's at peace. She loves me. She loves the whole family. Look at what I've done in my life. You know, maybe somebody that's been a drunkard or dealt drugs, even made drugs, messed with people, you know, in ways they shouldn't have. But maybe the grandmother still pray for them, get them back in, get them in church, get them back in if they once went.
That's like Nancy Hicks, you know, she fought cancer for several years, and right up till the day she passed away, she praised the Lord and honored God, and she believed in him, and she never wavered, she never wearied. And you know, I was telling somebody the other week, I said, if more people had faith like she had faith, that I seen her admit, I said, the world would be a lot better place.
Yeah.
She just had real, truly honest faith in God. No matter whether she knew she wasn't going to be healed here, she knew she'd be healed over there. And she was trusting in him and that 100%. And I believe she got her healed.
Like you said, we're here to make a covenant. I've asked, you know, maybe the grandma or mother's son, I've asked God to forgive me. I'd like for you to forgive me. She's done forgiving. God forgives right at the moment that you ask him. He just wants you to come to it. Wants you to live for him. Wants you to repent of the things that you do and go back to him. I tell you what, I'm as guilty, if not guilty or more, doing things I shouldn't do or not doing things I should do. That's the big thing.
Amen. Yeah.
But we just got to ask forgiveness for it, repent from it, start doing the things. Sometimes that's easier said than done. So, it's talking about a covenant. Where was I reading that at? let there be an oath betwixt us, even betwixt us and thee, and let us make a covenant with thee. Well, a covenant can have several different meanings, I guess. Covenant between Abraham and God was a promise, a bond. I guess it could be looked on as a treaty, a peace treaty. But I think more in this case between Abimelech and his folks and Isaac and his gang, it'd be more like a peace treaty. Our word's gonna bear a bond. We're not gonna mess with each other. I'm not gonna steal your stuff. Don't you steal my stuff. Stay away, We'll all get along. We'll all get along. Says, and that thou wilt do not hurt us, as we have not touched thee, as we have done unto thee nothing but good, and have sent thee away in peace. Thou art now the blessed of the Lord. They didn't really hurt him all that much. They sure were quarrelsome. They were hard to live with. And he made him a feast and did eat and drink. Kind of reminds me of a show I've watched on TV before. Every time you turn around, I watched that Viking show. Every time you turn around, they just want to feast. They wanted to eat and drink and be merry. It seemed like it happened every other episode. They were just looking for an excuse. Ain't that the way we are? But in this case, that was a real reason to celebrate. I mean, there's nothing greater to celebrate than people finally learning to get along. And
also shows his godliness and his righteousness, because, I'll admit it, if I've been quarrelsome with Alan for 2 straight months, years, whatever, and Alan comes up to me and said, I want to make peace, you think I'm gonna fix him a ham or something like that? But I should.
mhm,
I should, because it brings that personal relationship back to you.
Yeah.
Instead of just saying, okay, Alan, we're good, see you,
What are you trying to pull?
Yeah.
what's he up to?
Yeah, it just,
He been nice for no reason.
and but in your worldly mind, you're thinking that, Alan's up to something or something like that, instead of saying, I drop it, we're friends.
Yeah, let's just have the end to it. Something what I wrote here when I was studying this earlier, kind of says something along that line. It says, and right after I wrote feastings and celebrations, the Bible teaches us to be neighborly and to live peaceably among men. God smiled upon Isaac's actions and blessed him with another well, blessed him with another life, right? That's what you was talking about earlier. Blessed him with another opportunity to put life into this world.
And I absolutely love what he named it.
Yeah, I'm getting to that.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
No, you're
Tell.
fine. If you're getting to it, I'm fine. I love it.
They named it, let's see, what did they call it? Shabbat. Shabbat. Therefore, the name of the city is Beersheba, or Beersheba, I guess, unto this day. What does that mean?
Complete. It's done. Verse 7,
Mhm.
It means the number 7, and that's what I said. It's just amazing. I would still somewhat hold animosity towards Alan in my worldly view. If we strive that long, even though we try to make peace of it, I'll still think in the back of my mind, sorry, good for nothing individual. Wrong to me.
Can I trust you?
Yeah. But I like where they say it's complete. It's finished. Sorry.
There's another place in the Bible where they say it is finished. And that curtain or veil ripped from top to bottom. Y'all know how thick that thing was, right? It's about that thick. We can take a curtain, right? But if we're at the bottom of that curtain, where are you gonna rip it? From bottom to top. You can't rip it from top to bottom if you're below it. So who ripped that curtain? Who opened up the Holy of Holies for us? God did. Jesus' death on the cross. And God took that with, here you go. Now we can be at peace. Now you could not be so quarrelsome. Quarrelsome, that's got to be the word of the lesson, right? Quarrelsome. Don't be quarrelsome.
And another thing, you know, about Abimelech, when they run him off, you know, they was probably thinking, this rascal will never make it without us. You know, if we get him out of here, he'll never make it without us. And then they kicked him out and he just kept flourishing and adding and building and they think, well, what in the world, there's gotta be something going on here, you know? Here, we kicked him out in the middle of nowhere and he's still just prospering and prospering. So they got to thinking, hey, we better go back down here and talk to this dude because he's got something that we need to get a little bit of. And, you know, so that's what living for the Lord can do for you. And it calls other people to sometimes get jealous of you, like you say at first, but once they see that it's nothing that you're doing, it's just blessings from heaven.
Right.
You know, they start thinking, hey, why can't I have a little bit of that? And,
Right.
you know, the Bible says it's for everybody. So, you know, why can't we go down here and talk to Isaac and see if we can't rub elbows with him? Maybe some of that'll rub off on us, you know.
Yeah.
But a lot of times that's how people think. If we kick him out of here, he's not gonna make it without us.
Right.
But when the Lord's on your side, you don't need anybody else.
Right.
You know?
And that starts with what? That starts with obedience.
Yeah.
Isaac was obedient. He did everything he was told. And even when the king looked at him and said, y'all need to get out of here, he even listened to him. You know, we'll leave. Yeah, we'll go ahead and leave. And then it's the faith.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, they saw how prosperous he was because why? Because he had obedience and faith.
Yeah.
Everything was multiplied 100-fold. That's a lot. Can you imagine that?
Faith of a mustard seed.
That's right.
That's what I'm talking about. So we always go back to that little mustard seed. And that's all he requires of us. I mean, I like to think I got a little more than that, but that's all he requires of us.
It's kind of like mining Bitcoin 10 years ago, right? How much is that stuff worth now? One of them's worth 35,000, 100,000, what is it? It's all the way up there. And they couldn't even give it away at first. Now, for some reason, it's worth a lot. But that's 100-fold. I mean, somebody had faith that that was going to be, you know, you can correlate that. It's not exactly the same with us being obedient with God, but you can correlate that.
I also like the testimony that he's got that, you know, with God on your side, you know, well, I'll fight Alan's army and this and that and the other, but no, he backed up.
Yeah.
He didn't want to fight with them, didn't want to strife with them. He just backed off and went dug another way until there was peace and completion. I mean, I think it was more along the lines that Abimelech and his army or his group learned a lot from not fighting.
Yeah.
It was just a testimony of Isaac's faith that in the end it's going to be all right.
Well, verses 34 and 35, I'll read those. Because I read it and I'm not one to correct the Bible. I am not, but it seems like these two verses should be in the next chapter. Does that not seem that to you? I mean, I didn't write it or anything, but we'll go ahead and talk about it since it's part of the chapter. And Esau was 40 years old when he took I'll get it right in a minute. And Esau was 40 years old when he took to wife Judith, the daughter of a Hittite, I can't say those names, and Bashemath, the daughter of Elon, the Hittite, which were a grief of mind unto Isaac and Rebekah. So we go from a narrative that's talking about Isaac and his servants and Abimelech to now we're talking about Esau. And Esau was the oldest one. Wasn't he the oldest? He was the oldest of his sons. he didn't take a wife of maybe the servants or, back then it's kinfolk. A lot of times they married kinfolk. They didn't outlaw marrying kinfolk till when? Leviticus, when they was bringing out the law, because of during the earlier times, there wasn't all these abnormalities when families married. So there was cases where sisters and brothers married each other. What are y'all laughing about?
She said she thought about 1950.
Well, it depends on what state you live in, I guess. But anyway, he took 2 Canaanite or Hittite women. Well, that was just grand, wasn't it? Do they believe in the same God as Isaac? No. No, it doesn't. I wrote down here earlier, Esau marries 2 wives that are daughters of Hittites and who are strangers to the blessings of Abraham. They don't know anything about this. And you know what? They probably don't care. They probably don't, it don't mean nothing to them. He married without his parents' consent, and it grieved him greatly. Grieve. That's one of the worst ways of feeling, ain't it? One of the hardest things you can do is grieve. Grieve for a death. Grieve that you maybe lost everything that young. Grieve that you lost your whole family, like Job did. Job lost his whole family. In this case, he married 2 women, not 1. He married 2, so he's got double trouble coming. Children have little reason to expect God's blessings when they disobey or grieve their parents. What is it, Ephesians 6:1? Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. And then it goes on in a second for the parents not to egg on their children, not, nag them all the time and stuff like that. I mean, but even between parents and children, it's a give and take. It's difficult for us to receive God's blessings when we disobey Him or grieve Him. So I guess we can grieve God. We don't obey Him. And like we was talking about earlier, when we don't do what we know is right to do. What's sin of omission? The last thing I wrote when I was doing this is further proof of God's wisdom in choosing Jacob over Esau. God knew he was going to be here tonight. He knew exactly who was going to be here. Not only that, he knew how many hairs fell out of my head this morning I took a shower. He knew how many he ain't had in 20 years. I had to get a dig at you once tonight. Yeah, I'd say Alan and Glenn, they're the chosen ones here tonight.
No, Ty is. Ty's got the long.
I'm not even going to mention Ty. You talk about envy. I used to have hair like that, didn't I? Pretty long, blonde, flowing hair. Then it fell out. Anyway.
Turn loose, turn gray, huh?
Yeah, I wouldn't have minded if it just turned gray. Don't turn loose. But this one again is, I'm going to read this one more time. Children have little reason to expect God's blessings when we disobey or grieve their parents. It's difficult for us to receive God's blessings when we disobey Him or grieve Him. So that's one thing I guess we can all keep in mind the rest of the week. It's just, what are we doing that's pleasing unto God? Are we grieving Him or are we pleasing Him? Are we obeying or are we disobeying? Omitting, committing, what are we doing? What are we doing to show people that are not saved or maybe not going to church? Are we doing anything? And I'm talking to Brian here too. Are we doing anything to show them that we belong to the King? Are we doing anything? Isaac did in this chapter, didn't he? Does anybody have anything else? That's all I've got. Before we go, I'd say prayer. Our Father in heaven, we do thank you for the ones that came out tonight, Lord. And Lord, we just thank you for everything that you've done for us. Lord, we just ask a blessing upon the ones that are here and the ones that are not. Lord, we just ask you to look out after us the rest of the week as we go about our daily life. Lord, if there's anything in our life, Lord, any sin in our life, Lord, please forgive us of it. Remove it from us. Lord, we just ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.